And welcome back to a much shorter set this time because Byrgenwerth itself is not a very big area. But we're back in Bloodborne. Now, this is arguably the area where things stop being gothic horror for good, when it goes full on Lovecraftian cosmic stuff. And you'll see why when we see the boss, if the weird bizarre Garden of Eyes thing weren't much of an indication of weird science shit going down and experiments that were not meant to be. Although that is very gothic as well with Frankenstein, but nah. This area doesn't take too long to clear out. There are some nasty tricks with the enemies. Like these enemies can grab you and inflict frenzy. There's a brain sucker around who's a lot more powerful than the other brain suckers we've met so far. There's another creature who at a distance is dangerous, but you can close in and pretty much wreck them. And there's another NPC hunter who causes a lot of people trouble because she has a very, very, very nasty hunter tool, which we will not be getting ourselves for a very long time, and is indeed not very economical. I was just pointing out here there are some statues again of the messengers. Emphasising that, of course, the people who built Byrgenwerth and the Healing Church, and pretty much everywhere around the island, they were aware of the messengers, and quite possibly by extension the Hunter's Dream. Although the messengers appear in other nightmares as well. This is just a statue. Sort of a weird, gargoyle-esque statue if it were designed by H.R. Geiger with slightly fewer penises. But, yeah. This, I mean, arguably it's a Nightmare Frontier, so she can access it earlier, and indeed I did, but in terms of main story progression, I'd say this is the moment where it stops being gothic and starts being Lovecraftian, because there are more explicit references. And this was not my final attempt at a charge attack, because collision. But it does show off that these guys have a few tricks up their sleeve, like that. And if you get caught in that, as well as their more ranged projectile, it will stun you, and it will grab you, and they will suck your inside out. Oh, and this rune here, very much worth picking up. Because it's 7% arcane damage reduction, and the boss we're going to be fighting is pretty much going to be mostly arcane, in terms of their damage output. There's only this tiny bit of the outside area overlooking the lake, which is a very nice view, by the way. Pretty. What I will say about it, though, is that for some reason you have the reflection of the moon there, but you also have the light on the side that's reflecting from some other surface that we don't really see. That little circle bit over there is where you drop down and meet the boss. But to our left there, it's like, where is that light even coming from? It just makes no sense. But in any case, you can see like the size of the place here. As much as it's filled with enemies that can cause you a bit of hassle, it's very easily gone through. These guys are especially annoying of how quickly they can attack. If you have a relatively slow weapon, they can easily smack you out of whatever combo you're doing, so... I'd say with enemies like that, it's best to just hit them with charged attacks out of their range, which thankfully the Ludwig's Holy Blade is great at doing. Now this enemy just throws fireballs and stuff at you. It's really nasty to take on head on. It has a lot of resistances to its body. You're ideally meant to attack or shoot the head. But, you can just do this because it really struggles to attack you. But, you might want to be careful when you do that. Because it can lead to rather interesting shenanigans. Such as this. such is life in Yharnam. You don't question it, you just accept it. But yeah, that's the only one you see in the main game. Incidentally, if you are going through the Chalice dungeons and you need to get Arcane Haze very quickly, you can farm it with those enemies. So there's that. You can also farm sedatives off the Gardens of Eyes, although I've never really had to farm sedatives ever in all of my playthroughs, so yeah, it's there if you want it, I guess. That's the outside area done. With that opened up, we don't really need to be out here again. So inside here is where the NPC hunter is, and I'll spoil it here and that I approach this hunter like I do every other hunter, who doesn't have a gun. If you're thinking that the strategy I used on the Hunter of the Nightmare Frontier is basically a catch-all for cheesing every single NPC hunter, I will add the caveat that if they have a gun, it becomes a very different story, because they will punish your spam by parrying you, or interrupting you, as it's called in this game. Like this, and this hunter, or I say Byrgenwerth, or Quiet Scholar actually, and stuff. She has the equivalent of a bug sprayer, so she can't actually interrupt me unless she uses Augur of Ebrietas. But Augur of Ebrietas is just so slow in comparison to a gun that she just doesn't have a chance. And so what can be a very tough enemy, as you'll see when she eventually breaks out of my combo, because of her stupid amounts of health, she can do an awful lot of damage, and she hasn't fired off her party trick yet, but she will. But that's why I do what I do. You might say it's a bit cheap and it trivializes this enemy. This is a very spongy enemy. And if you don't do that, you're really at a loss. Because you can see how easily this enemy can turn the tide with their damage, and if I got hit by a single one of those, I would be dead. There would be no argument there. I would just be dead. There we go. Her appearance here is interesting because it does emphasize that there's still Healing Church activity or cooperation with Byrgenwerth in some form or another. And this is the second student garb that you can get. The one I like because it has a very lovely cape. And I'm a sucker for capes. Because they're nice and flowy and they allow the cloth physics to go around. But alas. It's also interesting to note that I'm not sure if there's meant to be any lore significance to this, but they added Damien of Mensis here. And he's there to help you kill the boss, which is weird because this boss is meant to hide the secret of what the School of Mensis is actually doing. So is he like a defector, or is he just there for the hell of it? It doesn't really make a lot of sense. But hey, he was added later into the game with the old Hunter patch. So I guess he was just put there for the sake of putting him there. And this description here emphasizes that Master Willem is on the lookout where you'll actually be dropping off to go and fight the boss. It doesn't mention whether he's alive or not, it just says in his final years. But we'll soon find the answer to that. In this chest is actually a pretty decent hunter tool, but with a caveat that it's almost completely useless for arcane builds. This is a tool that's really meant more for hybrid builds, like say a strength or a skill arcane build, because it can only really apply the buff to weapons that have no split damage, except for the Rite of Plash, which is the exception. As you can see, my Ludwig-infused weapon can't use it, nor can my Tonitrus. So it's of very situational usefulness. It doesn't scale with Arcane, it's flat damage, so it's more useful for hybrid builds. But it's there, it has its uses. It's a fairly cheap cost, I think it's like 3 bullets, which with blood bullets is nothing. It's absolutely nothing. I wanted to emphasize this before I went and restocked and got ready for the boss though, because this was the first time I really saw it, but there's, I think the name for them is a celestial child, and this is the first area you even see one of them. And don't mind that the cage is clipping through the books that are underneath it. It's still quite interesting to look, and here is quite possibly one of the most worthless shortcuts in the game. Because in order to get to that one, you'll have had to have gone through the area where you can open the other shortcut. So it's like, why would you bother? And that leads nowhere. So, yeah, small area, not really a lot done with it. Which really is a shame, considering how much emphasis they put on how important Byrgenwerth actually is. But there's enough of that. Now time to actually get to the boss. The boss, which I mentioned in the earlier set, is actually... it's not a very good boss. Imagine... if you've played Dark Souls 2, it's like the Duke's Dear Freya, and you approach it in a very similar way. Almost got grabbed there, but no, I did. It's very handy. But before I talk about that, let's actually have a look at Master Willem here, who after all this time is still around. And take a good look at his actual body. He has these growths coming out of his back. Remember that Willem is, big on the whole eyes thing and ascending humanity to Great One status. It seems he's quite on his way to being that way too. Whatever that entails. Which we might get to have a look at. So he's pointing us over there and he gives us a point of insight. The shame is, he doesn't actually tell you anything interesting. But he does drop something very lovely. So, apologies, Master Willem. But I just need more eyes. This is a very, very useful rune for farming, especially for things like blood chunks. Eyes symbolize the truth Willem sought in his research, disillusioned by the limits of human intellect, blah 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 blah, raising humanity through eyes, which is basically what Yosefka was on about, and what Willem was on about in the flashback. You're going to see a lot of that when it comes to the different groups and factions in the Healing Church. But it's time to kick some ass now, so let's just get on with it. This boss is actually a very good one to use Beast Blood pellets on as well, because you can get a lot of early hits in and shred the health of this boss. Like, it is exceptionally easy to just kill this boss in like a minute or so, if you're lucky, or you just manage to dodge hits. Let's have a quick look before we even do that. This is Rom the Vacuous Spider, and I have no idea why they called it a spider, because the design is more like a tick. But I suppose Rom the Vacuous tick doesn't have the same ring to it. And there are eyes all fucking over the thing. But this is where it just sits. It just sits stupidly here doing nothing. Until you come along and ruin its day. If you don't have Beast Blood pellets and you're doing an arcane run like mine, or you just can't be bothered using them, the Tonitrus absolutely destroys this enemy. Now there are two approaches. You can do the one that I'm doing, where you just ignore the spiders completely and rush the boss. That one has its disadvantages if you have low health or you're not good at dodging the spiders. You need to be able to keep an eye on what every single enemy around you is doing. Occasionally kiting. Less so than with Freya, but it does definitely help. And especially during this later stage, you'll want to do a couple of hits and then back away before Rom does anything, because Rom can do a hell of a lot of damage to you if you're not careful. The other approach is just to meticulously destroy the spiders, because Rom only summons more when she teleports away from you, and that's only done a few times. It's a safer way to do it, but it's also a much, much slower way. And after fighting this boss over and over again, I've just got into the habit of just rushing lots and lots of damage, because I know how to do it. So, whether you find this boss difficult, this is very much the same with Vicar Amelia in that this is a DPS check, and it's very easily trivialized by you getting lots of damage in, as you can see. It disappoints me. I didn't actually look at the item description for the King Coldblood, but it does describe Rom as one of the Great Ones, or at least a Great One. What Rom actually is isn't actually described until much later. But you'll find out. You'll find out. But before that, we have this peculiar figure as well, who's just materialized in the lake. And she is a figure who'll be just appearing in and out intermittently. On rare occasions in the main game. But this is Yharnam, the Pthumerian queen. Why she actually comes and materializes in and out? Well, you'll find out if you go and do the Chalice dungeons, but generally she is quite linked quite closely to the spread and the influence of the Great Ones. And now, things genuinely get explicitly weird. Ritual Secret is now officially broken. All the crap that was hidden from us from the start is no longer hidden from us. We get to see just how weird things get. We see all the amygdalas that are littered around Yharnam. Yahar Ghul is now open to us completely. It's part of main quest progression. And this is where it is, where you get grabbed to go to the Nightmare Frontier. This is where Yahar Ghul is actually kept. It is one of the many unseen places. Now the Ritual Secret is broken, there isn't really an unseen place to be. With one exception, I suppose, but we already got the invitation to go there. After this point, if you're just focusing on the main quest, or we're just sitting down here to contemplate that we just went and killed this enormous eye-ridden spider. Just, you know, soaking that in. But after this point there's only 3 mandatory bosses, and then you've beaten the game, and they're all in relatively quick succession. It is very easy to just churn through the main game content. But I believe doing so just kind of, you lose out on an awful lot. Some of the best areas in Bloodborne are the optional ones, after all. But I'm not actually going to be exploring Yahar Ghul this set. Because I don't want to do main quest progression stuff for a long time. My general,
Welcome home, good hunt. What is it you desire? good hunter. Your presence somehow soothes. I sense the ancient echoes. They course your veins.
So there's an interesting distinction
Good
between
hunter,
Great One blood and everybody else's blood.
Very well. Let me start.
Especially emphasizing how old it is, I suppose. But yeah, well, what I want to do with this set-wise is
Farewell, good may you
do most of the optional areas I can do before Yaha Ghul, and that includes the DLC. So I'll be clearing all of the DLC, and then going through Yaha Ghul and doing the main quest stuff. Although I think I'm thinking about how I want to do this. I'll probably end up doing the Upper Cathedral Ward, where the orphanage is, before I do the Nightmare of Mensis. But let's have a look at what's changed around Yana.
Oh, there you are. Forgive me, I'm a bit out of sorts. So, no blood today, I'm afraid.
Well, I wonder what on earth would be the matter.
There's something wrong with me.
It was probably just something she ate. How are you doing, creepy yandere lady? Well, at least you're enjoying yourself. And you.
Oh, there you are. You're early, dear. Is anything the matter? You can always tell me. Mother will make everything better.
That's reassuring.
What's wrong? Anything you'd like to tell me?
Well, she suddenly seems a lot less aggressive to us.
You always were the brave one. But you can't bottle up everything inside. You mustn't be afraid to share.
Try to ignore the, actually, looking at it now, when I went through the recording last, that bit over the archway looked like a seam where it was like not fully covering up the object with the textures, but it looks like it was just lighting.
You poor thing. But don't you worry. This'll help you forget. Forget your troubles. Forget your cares.
Well, there we have it. Good old Granny's a drug pusher. It's interesting that she even has her hands on these sedatives, because it seems to suggest that it's mainly within that, yeah, concocted at Byrgenwerth. It seems like something the Healing Church would utilise mainly for themselves. It wouldn't be something that was commonly spread, but I don't know, maybe Granny had good connections in the black market.
No more survivors. There can't be. Yarnum's done for.
And he's in as fine a mood as
There ain't
always.
No more Yarnum's.
So yeah, I'm actually kind of disappointed that, with a few exceptions, there isn't really a lot done with the character development of the people you send to Erden Chapel once you kill Rom. Like, good old Yandere lady doesn't actually do anything but giggle to herself maniacally and doesn't really do anything after that. And if you send the asshole guy over to here by telling him to go to the Seth's clinic, he will just sit around being all snarky and going like, yeah, I'm well smart, yeah. I read books and stuff. Actually, no, he says he doesn't read books and yet he's smart anyway, but anyway. Good for him. He just sits around and snarks all day. You know, I can appreciate that. Do it on a regular basis. But other than that, he doesn't really do anything, which is a shame. If I recall, in a very recent part of Franz's Dark Souls 3 playthrough, that is, A German Spy, for those not know, he mentioned very briefly about Miyazaki talking about how character quest lines were changed for Bloodborne based on what either his marketing team or just a bunch of shareholders had said to him, and a lot of them apparently really wanted dark, dead endings for them, and Miyazaki wanted to do a little bit more. Which really is a shame if that's the case. Oh yeah, more messengers. And that's a shame because it's another example of just how executive meddling can kind of ruin an experience. I am actually really disappointed in how many quest lines in this game just end in death. Because once a character is dead, like, their quest line is over, you can't really do anything else with them, and the characters have shallow enough quest lines already that it's just kind of a lazy cop-out of an ending to just say, oh, they do 2 things and then they die. And I hate that because in some cases, like with me, like with Yosefka to an extent with Alfred as well, he never really gets the development that he should have. It's just really disappointing, and in some cases just flat out confusing why the hell they just decide to off themselves randomly, or however they die. But yeah, suddenly Gascoigne's house is populated again. I wonder what that could be about.
You haven't by any chance seen my little sister, have you? I told her to look after the house, but she's run off somewhere. She's still quite small, and wears a big white ribbon. Have you seen her out there anywhere?
Yeah, about that. Josephine, ever the bearer of bad news.
How did this happen? Why would she ever go outside? At least I'll have something to remember her by.
Yeah, kinda my bad about that. Well, I'm sure she'll be fine.
What a perfect ribbon. And now it's mine. I can't wait to try it on.
I'm sorry, what? What? Sorry, did you say something? I didn't quite catch that.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Well, she got over her sister's death very quickly, didn't she? I will say in that girl's defense that the moon is making pretty much exclusively the women around Yharnam kind of mental. And yes, there's a lot of sort of birth and baby and motherhood themes going on throughout all of this. It's all very weird. And for a long time, people thought the blood administration thing was just menstrual blood, and I really, really hope it's not, because that's actually kind of gross. But yeah, that was an interpretation for a while. And then we have this strange creature, just chilling outside the I want to say bonfire, because that's basically what it is, but it's not. It's a lantern. It doesn't even function like a bonfire, actually. Now I think about it, it's more like the archstones from well, not archstones. What the fuck are they called in Demon Souls? Yeah, whatever. The checkpoints in that game. But yeah, he drops this rune. It's a pretty damn awesome rune, and I recommend picking it up. But where the hell did this thing even come from? Well, let's talk to our friend. Oh, my bad. It looks like something broke out of here rather violently, and it might have been a Gilbert. Turns out he didn't get to die human. What a shame. What I will say, as I was looking around at this, it's hilarious that they didn't actually bother to do anything with the interior, even though with this window broken, you can explicitly see inside of it. So you can see, this isn't a place where anybody would actually live. And indeed, the front side here, this facade has a door. But if you look inside, that bit is actually bricked off. Did Gilbert just get locked inside? Did he lock himself inside? No. The answer is, FromSoft didn't think anybody would notice. Because FromSoft is not a perfect company. But yeah, that was amusing when I found that out. So yeah, unfortunately Gilbert, as is the case when people take the blood of the church, they are susceptible to turning into beasts. And I'm kind of of the opinion that with you don't turn into one because you're sustained by the hunter's dream, and that's what that whole weird intro was about the beast getting to touch you and then just burning alive. It's basically meant to indicate that you can't be touched by the beasthood because you are, or consumed by it because you are sustained by the hunter's dream, unlike Gascoigne. But if you're a bit disappointed that I didn't actually fight Yosefka in the last set, maybe this will help to explain why I didn't. Once you go and visit her after beating Rom, she drops a very important item, and she, you'll see what she was actually trying to do to an extent, with all of this communing with the gods via turning people into celestial emissaries, and oh, I don't think they ever explain how the hell that works. She's just sitting here, in her weirdly lewd position. Her fingers and her feet just casually clipping through the table. It's weird that she's actually wearing the white church garb, because a lot of her indication with her behaviour and what she's trying to do is that she's a part of the choir. But in any case, it does look better on her than the choir garb, so I can understand that from an aesthetic perspective.
God, I'm nauseous. Have you felt this? It's progressing. I can see things. I knew it. I'm different. I'm no beast. Oh, God, it feels awful. But it proves that I'm chosen. Don't you see how they writhe inside my head? It's rather rapturous.
That was some kind of noise you just made right there. That was one hell of a noise.
God, I'm nauseous. It's
Fake Yosefka best waifu. Definitely the weirdest. And then we just mercilessly kill her. And we get this. Which, I don't know why they did this with the localization for the EU. They call it third umbilical cord when it's supposed to be 1/3 of an umbilical cord. It is the most bizarre decision they've made, because it means two different fucking things. Ugh. Anyway, this is an indication that Yosefka was actually pregnant with a Great One, and that was what she was trying to do. And it's funny that that happens once you kill Rom. Because again, it's linked to the ritual secrets and exposing what's actually happening and so on and so forth. But gee, I wonder whether anybody else might be afflicted in that way. Curious. Curiouser and curiouser. As Alice said, forgetting how to English. Don't quite know how that direct quote goes, but that's the basic joke. Alice in Wonderland. But anyway, there's one more thing I want to do before I end this set, and that's find out what happened to the older daughter, because, again, guess how her questline ends, eh? Gee, is it like every other questline in this game, bar only a few examples? Does it end perhaps in death? Does the Pope wear a rabbit-eared hat? Yeah. It ends in death. She's just down there. It's unclear whether she went down there and got blatted in the face by that big dude, or whether she just dropped feeling very suicidal. Because, let's face it, she has no dad, she has no mum, and her younger sister is dead. I can understand that. We finally get back the white messenger ribbon, which is why I held onto that item and left the messengers unadorned. A ribbon made of fine lace that shines remarkably, more suited to pretty young girls than silly old messengers. We're just making everybody's day the dandiest, aren't we? Good job, Josephine.